Masechet Eruvin, Daf Sadivav. We're in the middle of the first Amud. We began the Perek. We're talking about if you're out walking in the street and you see a pile or one or many tefillin, and you want to bring them into safety. And so the way to do that without violating carrying is actually by wearing them on Shabbat, because you're still wearing them after all. And so we have some machloket. How about one? Can you just bring one pair at a time, or even two pair at a time? And so that partly depended on whether Shabbat is the time for tefillin. Can you, or even must you, wear tefillin? We wear tefillin every day, including Shabbat, or not including Shabbat. So we saw the vast majority of opinions is that we do not wear tefillin on Shabbat, as is the halacha nowadays. But we did quote such an opinion that theoretically, at least there is an opinion out there that one does wear it on Shabbat. And so we want to ask, that's what we're starting off with here. Who thinks that we should wear tefillin on Shabbat? What's the name of this author? So we're going to try 4 different possibilities. Perhaps Rabbi Akiva, we reject that. Rabbi Natan, reject that. Someone who said that Michal bat Shaul or bat Kushi wore tefillin, reject that. And we end up saying that it actually could be Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. And so we'll see all the sources and reasons for each, and we arrive at the conclusion that they may be the ones that say that you can wear tefillin on Shabbat. Okay, that'll be most of the sugya. In the end, we'll talk about another case of finding dyed threads and finding new tefillin, because the Mishnah also said only if you find used tefillin can you save them, because you know for sure that they've been used as tefillin. Whereas something new, you're not sure if is it tefillin or is it an amulet. So we'll compare the parallel case to finding threads that are blue and wondering were they made for sisit or just for fancy clothing. All right, that's the agenda for the daf. So we begin. Uman shemat le Shabbat zeman tefillin. Who says that one must wear tefillin on Shabbat? Rabbi Akiva, Tanya. V'shamarta et hachuka hazot l'mo'ada miyamim yamima. This is said. We say this every morning at Kadesh Li. The paragraph. This is actually recited. This is included in the tefillin. It's talking about mitzvot regarding Pesach, my korban Pesach. That you should do this. You should be careful and observe this law at its time, miyamim yamima, meaning every year. Okay, so now why do we have a double language here, miyamim yamima? So we learned from this, yamim velo lelot, that it applies to day and not night. Actually, that paragraph talks about tefillin also. That's why we put it in the tefillin. So it's talking about tefillin and Pesach. So right now we're assuming that it's talking about tefillin also. And so that means tefillin is done during the day and not at night, which is in fact what we do now. We wear tefillin during the day. We do not wear tefillin at night. And then that's why it says the double language. What about the mem of mi yamim? Why do you have to say that? Mi yamim velo kol hayamim. So the mi means from something, of something, not all the days, but only a subset of days, not all days. So which are excluded? Parat Shabbatot v'yamim tovim, divrei Rabbi Yosef HaGalili. So this excludes on Shabbat and Yom Tov, we do not wear tefillin. And so that's the first opinion. Okay. But so Rabbi Yosef HaGalili says we would not wear tefillin on Shabbat and Yom Tov. However, Rabbi Akiva disagrees in the same Baraitan, says Rabbi Akiva Omer lo ne'emar chuka zo ela le'inyan Pesach bilbad. It's true in that paragraph does talk about tefillin and korban Pesach, but this pasuk is only talking about korban Pesach, which actually makes sense because it says observe this at its proper time every year. Well, yamim, I guess, could mean daily, which was what we do with tefillin, but it could also mean yearly at a regular time. So he says it's only talking about Pesach. And so it's teaching us something about Pesach, not anything about tefillin. And so since Rabbi Akiva disagrees with Rabbi Yosef HaGalili and says that this pasuk is only telling us about Pesach and not tefillin, therefore you see there is no derivation that says tefillin should be limited only to weekdays and not Shabbat Yom Tov. So that's our first possibility. Rabbi Akiva is the author who says that Shabbat is a time to wear tefillin. Okay, good. Let's test this out. Ve'ela haditnana Pesach v'amila misvot aseh lema delo ke'Rabbi Akiva. De'i Rabbi Akiva kevan demokeh la b'Pesach lav nemeika ke'Rabbi Abin amar Rabbi Ilai. Amar Rabbi Abin amar Rabbi Ilai kol makom shenemar hishamer pen ve'al eno ela belo ta'aseh. Let's start backwards. Right. So this statement of Rabbi Abin, he said, whenever you find in the Torah key words like hishamer, be careful, pen, lest something happen, al, don't. This is always introducing a lo ta'aseh, a mitzvah, a negative mitzvah, what you should not do. And therefore, this pasuk here says, V'shamarta et hachuka hazot. V'shamarta is a warning word. And so, therefore, this is a negative precept. Now, here's the thing. Rabbi Akiva in a Mishnah says that Pesach and Brit Milah are mitzvot aseh. These are things that you must do. You must consume, eat Korban Pesach. You must do Brit Milah. And so you see that we have a problem here, because if in fact Rabbi Akiva said this statement, it contradicts what he says in the Mishnah. Because if he thinks that this pasuk, V'shamarta, is talking about Korban Pesach, and the word V'shamarta is a prohibition type of word, then Rabbi Akiva should think that there's a negative commandment to not eat something that is not Korban Pesach, right? To not forego the mitzvah of Korban Pesach. And yet in the Mishnah it says it's a positive commandment. So what's going on? There's some disconnect, there's some mismatch between these things. Is Pesach a positive commandment, what he says here, or a negative commandment if you say that Shamarta applies to Pesach? That's the question. And the answer is somewhat straightforward. Afilu tema Rabbi Akiva, hishamer de lav, lav. Hishamer de aseh, aseh. No, not every hishamer is introducing a negative commandment. Look at the context. If it's hishamer regarding something not to do, right? Be careful not to, then it's a lav. But hishamer de aseh, if it's observe, be careful to observe regarding a positive commandment, then we should interpret it as a positive commandment. And that's what it is here. V'shamarta et hachuka hazot. Be careful to observe this positive commandment. And so Rabbi Akiva is perfectly consistent. In this Mishnah, he also says it's a positive commandment. All right, all that is as a tangent. But now let's get back to the main argument. Does Rabbi Akiva Shabbat Zaman Tefillin Hu? Does Rabbi Akiva really think that you should wear tefillin on Shabbat? So far, we haven't seen a positive proof. We only saw that Rabbi Akiva doesn't accept Rabbi Yosei Galilee's proof. But just because he doesn't accept that proof doesn't mean that he doesn't actually say anything yet about tefillin. And so here's an explicit source that says the opposite. B'hatanya Rabbi Akiva Omer, Yachol yaniach adam tefillin b'Shabbatot v'yamim tovim. Should you wear tefillin on Shabbat Yom Tov? No. Talmud Lomar, v'ya lecha leot al yadecha, mi shesirichin ot, yatsu elu she'ehen gufan ot. Okay, so because the pasuk says that the tefillin will be a sign upon your arm, a sign that we are committed to the berit, that we are part of it. Therefore, this teaches that only a regular day, a weekday, where you need a sign, you need a reminder on that day that you are committed to the berit. On Shabbat, Shabbat itself is an ot, right? Shabbat, just by observing Shabbat, you are showing that you are committed to the berit. So therefore, you don't need another sign. It would actually kind of be insulting to have to put another sign on top of it, right? If you were holding a stop sign and then I come and bring a bigger stop sign, you're like, wait, what's wrong with my stop sign, right? You don't think it's good? And so therefore it would be insulting to Shabbat, which is itself a great ot to require someone to put on tefillin on Shabbat as well. All right, so that's a very beautiful and meaningful reason, and Rabbi Akiva said that explicitly. So now we tried Rabbi Akiva, and it's true he didn't apply that one pasuk. He said that's from Pesach, but he does say it's a sign, and you don't need two signs, and therefore Rabbi Akiva is out. Instead, we're going to try Rabbi Natan. Let's see what he says. Ela haytanahu detanya haneor balayla rasa choletz rasa meniach wear tefillin. They used to wear tefillin all day, so they're wearing it all day, and now it gets dark. But he's not going to sleep just yet. He's going to stay up at night. So if he wants, he can put it away, or if he wants, he can keep it on. Dibre binatan. So according to the binatan, you are allowed to wear tefillin at night. He disagrees with Rabbi Yosef also. Now, Yonatan Kitoni Omer and Manichin Tefillin Balayla. Okay, period. That's the end of the Braita. So Rabbi Kitoni says you do not put it on at night, but the first Tana says, Binatan says you do put it on at night. Now let's make an analogy. Mid Layla, the Tana Kama Zman Tefillin, Shabbat Nameh Zman Tefillin. So wouldn't it make sense that if you can wear tefillin at night, then you also, he would say you wear it on Shabbat? Well, what's the connection? I guess the point is that Rabbi Yosef Gilili above said you don't wear it at night and you don't wear it on Shabbat. And so if he's disagreeing with Rabbi Yosef Gilili, then it's likely that he's disagreeing on both counts, right? So therefore, oh look, we have Rabbi Natan, he might be the author. Well, not necessarily. That's pretty weak. Dilma Sibira le Laila Zeman Tefillin Hu Shabbat, Lav Zeman Tefillin Hu. It could easily say, right, that you can wear it at night, but not Shabbat. These are two different time periods. And actually, that would to make some sense. Shabbat lav zeman tefillin hu. And actually, that would match what we know from Rabbi Akiva, because Rabbi Akiva, remember, he never said any prohibition about wearing it at night. He rejected Rabbi Yosef Gilili's derivation. He only said not to wear it on Shabbat because Shabbat is a sign and you don't need another sign. But nighttime is not a sign, it's not an ot of anything. So actually, this would fit perfectly with Rabbi Akiva, that you could wear it at night, but you would not wear it on Shabbat. And so there you go. So actually, halakha l'maaseh, there's a machloket why we don't wear it at night. Some say it's midoraita, you should not wear it at night, and we saw a derivation. Others say, really, technically, you could wear it at night. The problem is that you might fall asleep. And so it's not respectful to the tefillin to be sleeping with them on. This applies during the day also. If if you didn't get a good night's sleep and then you're saying shacharit with tefillin on and you doze off, it's a problem. You should make sure to sleep or stand up and not fall asleep with tefillin on. Okay, so according to Rabbi Akiva, from the letter of the law, you could, and that makes its way into some poskim as well. All right, so we rejected the second. We tried to be Natan. It talks about night like it's like nighttime, but we said no, it's not like nighttime. So now we'll try a third possibility. Ella haytanahu de Tanya. Michal bat Kushi hayta manachat tefillin velo michu ba chachamim ve ishto shel Yonah hayta ola laregel velo michu ba chachamim midela michu ba chachamim al makasabre. Misvat aseh shelo hazeman gerama hi. Okay, we have a tradition, a braita, that there was a certain woman named Michal, the daughter of a Kushi. We don't know exactly who this Kushi was. It may be Melech Shaul, who, so that's what some of the commentaries say, but or maybe more contemporary with the rabbis, someone that was known as Michal Bat Kushi. Whoever it was, doesn't matter. The point is that she wore tefillin, and the rabbis did not object to it. So therefore, you see that since she wore tefillin, now generally a woman is not obligated, does not perform mitzvot shazman gerama. Now, if tefillin is something that you put on weekdays but not Shabbat, then it would be mitzvot shazman gerama. From the fact that she wore tefillin, that means, and the rabbis accepted that, according to this tradition, whoever said this, they must think that tefillin are not time bound, because look, a woman was permitted to wear it, and if it's not time bound, that means you do it on Shabbat too. Okay, so that's the derivation. Must be that this must be the author of the person that says tefillin can be worn on Shabbat, and therefore women would be obligated to wear them as well. The other thing that's mentioned here is Yonah, the wife of Yonah, used to go up to Jerusalem for the holidays to go on pilgrimage, Aliyah L'Regel, and the rabbis also accepted that and said that's fine that she did that, and not only men but women should do it too. Okay, so that is the proof, but we're going to question it. Dilma sabarla kedebi yoseh tamar nashim somuchot reshut. The idea is that perhaps she was not obligated to wear tefillin, but she did it voluntarily. And even though it's actually misvat aseh shazman gerama, and you cannot do it, you do not do it on Shabbat, and nevertheless, so that means she didn't have to, but she could voluntarily, and therefore this would follow another opinion of Rabbi Yosef said. Rabbi Yosef, in a different context, was talking about putting your hands upon an animal. If you bring a sacrifice, then you must put your hands and your weight on the animal in order to designate it as yours, and thereby it kind of represents you before you slaughter it. Now, this is done by men who bring a korban. Now, what about women? So the women do not have to do this. The question came up was the woman wanted to do it because women can bring. Sometimes they have to bring korbanot if they sin for other reasons. And so, if let's say a woman comes and says, I want to do the semicha, can I?" And so the Rabbi said, yes, even though they don't not obligated to, they can. It's optional, so they can do something that they're not obligated to do. So, just like we have that opinion regarding that mitzvah, so too regarding tefillin, perhaps this Tana says, although women are not obligated, the rabbis were okay with it because she can do it voluntarily, and there's no problem with that. And therefore, in this, according to this reasoning, she is not obligated because this doesn't apply on Shabbat. So therefore, it is a misvat she hazman gerama, and therefore, there's no proof from here that they believe that you must wear it on Shabbat. Okay. And in fact, this seems to make sense, the second explanation, that it was voluntary. The other example was going on pilgrimage, and the rabbis were okay with this woman going on pilgrimage. Everyone agrees that going on pilgrimage is time dependent. Obviously, you only go on the holiday, on Pesach, on Sukkot. So therefore, it must be that this woman was not obligated to go make aliyah laregel as misvat shezman geramahu, and yet she did it voluntarily because the rabbi said, even though she's not obligated, she may do it voluntarily, and she still did a good deed. So too, regarding tefillin, would be parallel to this case, and therefore tefillin is time bound, cannot be done on Shabbat. Ella kasaba reshut, hachena mereshut, and she did it voluntarily, and the rabbis were okay with her doing it voluntarily. All right, so that exhausts that possibility, and now we're going to end with some of that. So another, it's good we brought number 3 because the last one's also going to involve the possibility of women wearing tefillin, and we are going to say this is Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda that hold this opinion that you do wear them on Shabbat. Ella haytanahi detanya hamotze tefillin machnisan zug zug echad haish ve'echad haisha. So you're walking in the street with your wife and you find a pile of tefillin and you want to bring them inside. So according to echad dashot ve'echad yishonot, according to the Rabbi Meir, both the husband and the wife should put on tefillin in order to save them if you have many there. And he also adds whether they're new or old. Okay, this is against the Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda oser b'chadashot umatir b'yeshanot. This follows our Mishnah, right? Our Mishnah said the same thing. Not new ones because maybe they're amulets, but old ones, yes. Anyway, the point is that Rabbi Yehuda only disagrees with the Rabbi Meir regarding the new tefillin, but does not disagree regarding women wearing them. So therefore, both Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda think that women may wear tefillin on Shabbat. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means why can women wear them? Remember, we said yesterday that if you're not fulfilling a mitzvah or the potential of fulfilling a mitzvah, then you're carrying them, right? You're not wearing them. It can't simply be an ornament. It has to be in a place where you would fulfill the mitzvah. So if women are allowed to save them on Shabbat, it must be that they are chayavot. And if they're chayavot, it means that it's mitzvah taseh shelo hazman gerama. And if it's not time bound, that means you can perform tefillin anytime, including on Shabbat. So there you go. We have now 2 opinions. We're going to discuss a little more, but we're going to affirm this. The only difference between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda regarding new ones, but they all agree that a woman can. So the only reason that they could possibly think that the woman must even wear the tefillin and save them is because they are chayavot, and they can only be chayavot if it's misvat aseh that is not time bound. If it's not time bound, that means that you wear them on Shabbat. So there you go. They are the authors. We ask V'dilma sabar la said amanashim somchot reshut. Well, maybe not. Maybe they were just doing it voluntarily. Maybe there really is no mitzvah on Shabbat for anyone. But just like a man who is not obligated to put it on Shabbat can still save them on Shabbat, a woman can voluntarily, if she wants, wear them, right? And thereby, since it is a mitzvah, if she does it, she can wear them and not be considered carrying, even though she has no mitzvah and no mitzvah because you don't wear them on Shabbat. So we're going to bring that same challenge that we said before, that perhaps is voluntary. But we reject this in this case. La sakadatech. We can prove that both Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda do not agree in general with Rabbi Yosef regarding Rabbi Yosef, again, who said you can do semicha on the animal, even though it's not a mitzvah for her to do it, she can do it voluntarily. So how do we know that they disagree with Rabbi Yosef? Lo Rabbi Meir sabar like Rabbi Yosef ditnan, en me'akevin et hatinokot militkoa, hanashim me'akevin, ustam matitin Rabbi Meir. Okay, this is regarding blowing a shofar. So obviously, we blow shofar on Rosh Hashanah, not when it's Shabbat. And the only reason we're allowed to is because it's a mitzvah. Generally, we don't play instruments on Shabbat or Yom Tov. If I want to go get my shofar on Shabbat and start making a band, right? It's a problem. So we only are allowed to blow shofar because it's a mitzvah. So therefore, only if I'm fulfilling a mitzvah. Now, the Yosef adds that, let's say a child wants to blow shofar on Shabbat, it's okay, we don't stop him, right? We let them, because one day they're going to grow up and they're going to be chayav. So they are still within the boundary of being chayav to blow shofar, so they can blow also. But if a woman comes and starts blowing shofar on Shabbat, or on Rosh Hashanah too, then, only on Rosh Hashanah, then we stop her. Why? Because she is not fulfilling a mitzvah. So what you see here is she's not obligated. Obviously, it's Misvat Asher Hazman Gerama. It only applies on Rosh Hashanah. But not only is she not obligated, she cannot even voluntarily do it because it's not considered a mitzvah if she voluntarily does it. And so that's the Mishnah. It's a Stam Mishnah. Stam Mishnah is Rabbi Meir. So therefore, you see that Rabbi Meir does not think that women may voluntarily perform mitzvot that they are not obligated to do, then disagrees with Rabbi Yosef. And so too, Rabbi Yehuda also. V'lo Rabbi Yehuda sabar like Rabbi Yosef, Detanya, daber el bnei Yisrael v'samach, bnei Yisrael somchin, ve'en benot Yisrael somchot. Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Shimon omrim nashim somchot reshut. Regarding the issue of placing your hands on an animal, they also disagree. The Torah says, go tell Bnei Israel that they should rest their hands on the animal. That's only Bnei Israel, the men, and not the women. That's the first opinion. This is all a quote from the Sifra. The Sifra is the Tanaitic Midrash on Sefer Vayikra. Right here, this is a pasuk from Sefer Vayikra. Now, the Yosef there says they can, if they want to. It's optional, but they can voluntarily decide they want to do this mitzvah. Now, who is the author of the first opinion? It's anonymous. But we have a rule, Stam Sifra Maneh, Rabbi Yehuda. Just like we have a rule that anonymous Mishnah is Rabbi Meir, we have a rule that anonymous quote from this Midrash called the Sifra is Rabbi Yehuda. And so now what we see here is that both Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir disagree with Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef says women can do mitzvot that they're not obligated to voluntarily. And Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda say they cannot. That is not considered any fulfillment of a mitzvah if a woman should put on tefillin. Therefore, what do we see? Well, since they also said that a woman may wear tefillin on Shabbat in order to save them if they're in public, that means that they have to be obligated to wear tefillin. Otherwise, they could not do it simply voluntarily. And if they're obligated, that means it's a mitzvah taseh shelo hazman gerama. It is not time dependent. If it's not time dependent, that means that it applies on Shabbat as well. And there you go. That's our proof. Took a lot of steps to get there, right? But that's the proof. It's not the majority opinion, and it's not the halacha l'maaseh, but there is such an opinion out there. Okay, good. So that concludes that section, and now for a related question of finding not tefillin but finding sisit. Now sisit, the threads of the sisit have to be spun in having in mind that these are for sisit. They have to be lishma. Okay, you can't just pick up something that was already made and use it for sisit. So now, you're walking around the marketplace and you look on the floor, you see a bag, and in it is some techelet, some blue dyed string. Now you don't know, was it prepared and dyed for sisit, and therefore can you go use it to make my sisit, or is it just from a fabric company that to make some fancy fabric, and then I cannot use it? So the answer is depends. Lishonot pisulot. If it's a strip, then it's not used because we don't use a strip of cloth to make sisit, only a thread. Chutin kesherin. If it's a thread, then it's fine. We can assume that it was prepared for sisit. Okay. Now, if I see a strip, I say presumably this was made for a cloak. For a garment. That's why it's in a strip. Why say the same thing? Maybe it's find a thread, and someone said it's a thread to make clothing. Who said that just because it's in a thread that this was made for sisit? Anyone would use a thread. We answer bishezurim. They're twisted. The thread is twisted in such a way that it's not used for usual weaving. It's only styled in that way for sisit. So that's a marker that says it's for sisit. Still not sufficient. Shezurim name nemadata de shifta de gelima aifinhu. People do use such a twisted thread, for example, on a hem of a cloak, right? And you have this thing that's twisted. It looks nice to be a hem. So there's no way to tell if this was made for sisit or for regular clothing. So why are you assuming that it's okay? The answer bemuf sakin. We're talking about where they're cut up into small sections. If you're using it for sisit, all you need is a couple of feet wide to go and tie each one. Whereas when you're using it for regular clothing, you don't cut it up into small pieces. You'll need the long pieces to go around the entire cloak. And so that's what's talking about, a case where it's cut up small. So if it's thread and twisted and cut up into little pieces, then I can assume that it's for sisit, because it would be very unusual for someone to prepare it that way for regular clothing. Okay, now that we got that, we're going to ask a question on it. Amadava v'chi adam torech lasot kameya kemin tefillin. Are you really not worried even about unusual circumstances? Because here it's unusual, but so therefore we say it's unusual for people to prepare cut up blue strings twisted, and therefore we can assume. Can we make that assumption, or do we have to worry about unusual circumstances? Rava says, look at our Mishnah. Do people go through the trouble when they want to make an amulet to make it look like tefillin? It's hard to make tefillin. You got to make it black. You got to be a certain shape, a certain way, right? It's extra difficulty. Amulet doesn't need all those requirements. So therefore, if you see something that looks like tefillin, can't you assume it's tefillin, right? Yet the Mishnah says no. Patur. Only once they're used. I guess once they're used, they already have the straps on them. Maybe they're in a bag. It says tefillin, right? You can tell. But when they're in the raw state, a new state, you can't tell if they are or not. So even though it's unusual for people to go through the extra work in making their amulet look like tefillin, the Mishnah says we worry about unusual cases. And we say, if it's amulets, we cannot violate Shabbat by putting them on and bringing them in because they're not holy in the way tefillin are. So therefore, Rava says we do worry about unusual circumstances, and therefore we should worry in the case of tzitzit also. And unless we know for sure that this was prepared for tzitzit, we should not use these threads that we found. Amar Rabbi Zera lahava bere pok tene lehu. So Rabbi Zera tells his son, whose name was Ahava, a nice name, his name was Mr. Love. He says, go and tell them the following baraita. I know a baraita that will help them. Hamoseh techelet bashuk leshonot pesulin chutin mufsakin kesherin lefisha en adam toreach. Perfect. This is exactly what we were looking for. A baraita that says if you find regular blue strips, it's not good. You have to assume that that's for clothing. But if you find threads and they're cut up in small pieces, then it's fine because people don't bother pre-cutting their pieces into small bits to use for clothing. That is probably for CC to be unusual. So there you go. This proves the original halacha and says that we don't worry about unusual circumstances. And this is a challenge to Rava's proof. What's Rava going to say? Amar Rava, umishum detane la hava bere de Rabbi Zera kefe tela la. Where he says, okay, so what? You have a braita. Just because this Mr. Love, right, has a halacha, so right, he has hung ornamental rings on it, right? He has a nice, beautiful dust. That means we have to follow it, and we have to assume that that's authoritative. He has a braita. So what? But we have our own sources. V'hatenan, b'meh devrim amorim b'yishanot, ava b'chadashot patur. I brought a Mishnah too, and my Mishnah showed that we do worry about unusual circumstances because we worry that maybe this thing that looks like tefillin is actually an amulet, even though it's unusual to go through that extra work. Ela marava tarach velo tarach tanaehi. Rather, the reason why you have a braita and I have a Mishnah is because of the machloket tanaim. That Tanya hamoset tefillin machnisan zug zug, echad ish ve'echad isha, echad chadashot ve'echad yeshanot. Dibnei Rabbi Meir. This is the Tosefta we quoted above. Rabbi Yehuda omer b'chadashot oser b'chadashot umatir b'yeshanot. So our Mishnah follows the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who says that new ones you do not save because you worry about the unusual circumstance that they are amulets. But Rabbi Meir, the first opinion here, says we save whether they're new or old. That means he thinks that we don't worry about unusual circumstances, right? Because you can assume if there's someone went through the trouble that they are in fact tefillin. Alma mor savar tarach inish, mor savar lo tarach inish. And therefore, Rava says I can stick with my guns. I don't have to accept your baraita. Your baraita follows Rabbi Meir. My Mishnah, I follow Rabbi Yehuda. And so we'll continue a bit more about that tomorrow. Baruch Adonai Olam. Amen ve'amen.